young man walking in the way, and I could see within his eyes that he was there to stay. He was faithful as a brother, he was faithful as a friend, looking for a lasting city, faithful to the end. Even when the road grew rugged and the sky turned black, trusting in his King, he had no thought of turning back. In the midst of persecution, with his dying breath, magnified the one who kept him faithful unto death. He was faithful as a brother, he was faithful as a friend, looking for a lasting city, faithful to the end, looking for a lasting city, faithful to the end.
Welcome to Plain Talk About Life in the Bible. We're continuing on with Pilgrims' Progress by John Bunyan. If you were with us last week, we're at that stage where the great battle between Apollyon and Christian has been fought on the road to holiness. A battle that lasted most of a day. When it looked like our hero would meet his end, as God would have it, as Bunyan says, the sword came back to his hand. He ran the Apollyon through, and God delivered him. Now, as I'd said before, the key thing that was happening in Bunyan's life was his pride, it appears, had led him to sort of feel the assurance of being in a church. He was certain he was a Christian now, and somehow it had crept up on him that his behavior was now reformed and good, and he got some sort of assurance from his feelings in these matters. And that's a very dangerous thing for a Christian. If you get the assurance that you're heaven bound, you need to get it from the Scriptures. You certainly don't need to get it from your behavior, as I've tried to explain to you over and over. The best of what you do as a Christian and the best of who you are as a Christian needs forgiveness. You don't give impeccable service. You are a mixture while you're in this world. You still have these desires of old Adam in you mixed with this new regenerated spirit, and there's a battle going on inside of you. And that battle often spills out into ugly, empty words and ugly, empty service in this world. So you need to understand that if you're like Bunyan and you say, well, now I've been a member of the church for 25 years and I go to Sunday school every Sunday, and it's meaningless. That's meaningless. It has no merit. It never will have any merit. Merit is something that we as Protestants don't believe in. Okay? So only Christ has merit. So you have to understand that, or you'll start feeling good about yourself and find yourself to be somebody who only feels good about himself. Bunyan wrestled with this because he coupled with this idea of his doubts and unbeliefs about how God treated the church, and then doubts and unbelief about his own salvation finally were the upshot of it. And I'm only conjecturing on some of these things. But you've got to understand his plight, because now he's had this giant battle. It's gone on for a year in his life. And now he's feeling the assurance of his belonging to Christ for the right reason, and that is he's looking at his Bible again. So he finally says it this way in a little poem. A more unequal match can hardly be. Christian must fight an angel. But you see, the valiant man by handling sword and shield doth make him, though a dragon, quit the field. So he goes on and says, when he gave this wonderful little expression about thanksgiving. He gave God the thanks now for his victory. And he has delivered me out of the mouth of the lion. Oh, thanks to him who did help me against Apollyon. Then he ends it with a curious thing. Then there came to him a hand with some of the leaves of the tree of life, the which Christian took and applied to the wounds he had received in battle, and was healed immediately. Bunyan is such a clever writer, and I'm sure in the battle our hero had gotten wounded in the head and in the hand and in the foot, and he's distressed. And now this hand comes with leaves, which I'm sure represents the blood of Christ, and it healed him of all of his wounds. All the wounds of the past 12 months that Bunyan had suffered personally, agonizing over all of these things that were wrong in his thinking, where he could get hardly peace for an hour for a year, by his own description in his autobiography. You see all of a sudden that Christ brought peace to his mind, and that he was healed by these leaves. And you can see that Christ's forgiveness is like any balm or something that's a miraculous balm that would be applied to any wound that you might receive. So if you're out there and you've suffered from the same things, where you've really been under God's chastening, and you've gotten through the battle and you're wounded and you're feeling it, you have to just kneel down and go to Christ and say, I need those leaves that Bunyan talked about. I need that healing, and I need to just know that you love me. Because as I said last week, Christ loves you not because you are wonderful. He loves you because you need to be loved. And sometimes, even though people will say to me, well, Bill, I don't want to get saved by my works. After all, I don't believe in that. I say to them, I know you are past that, but you're not past being kept by your works. Sometimes when you become a Christian, and you're finally, like Bunyan, burdened, and you're a wicked person, especially you've been forgiven a lot, there comes a day in the church world where they accept you, and you start to think that you're a pretty swell fellow. And that's a dangerous time. Bunyan felt it. I know what that feels like. Spiritual pride's a wicked and ugly thing. And that's exactly where we are, where Bunyan was, where I've been. And you start saying, I'm okay. My works are pretty good. I'm serving God. It's a dangerous thing. Your works are nothing but spotted. They're never perfect. It takes forgiveness to accept your works. Please get that through your heart, through your head. And we'll pick up now with one of my new characters that I love. A man named Faithful becomes Christian's companion. The next section is really one I'm going to pass over for a minute and come back at a later date. It's about our hero leaves the valley of humiliation and immediately enters the valley of the shadow of death. And he goes through a kind of a fearful time in the valley of the shadow of death. And I just want to treat that at a later date, and there's a purpose for that, I think, when we get to part 2. But I am anxious to get to the new character we're going to run into. His name's Faithful. And he's a wonderful guy, Mr. Faithful. He proves to be a great companion. And Bunyan utilizes him, whoever he was in Bunyan's world, Bunyan utilizes him in the story as somebody who undergoes a whole different sort of a testing and a whole different sort of a life than Bunyan himself did, which is very clever because that's how it is. I have my own personal trials in my life that you may not have. I may be a very prideful person, and that may never afflict you. But on the other hand, I may have a very sound determination that God will always help me in a time of trouble, and you may waver and wonder if God cares for you at all when you're in trouble. We all have our different personalities, our different weaknesses, our different afflictions, and our different strengths. And God deals with us accordingly. It's not one medicine for all. It's individualized medicine. Whatever your particular cancer is, God takes that medicine that treats your cancer and treats it for you. Whatever my cancer is, God treats mine with his other special cocktail that's reserved only for the kind of cancer that Bill Moore has. Thankfully, he has the ability and the willingness to treat us at all And he does, to his glory and our good. Now, he says this, he ran into Faithful, and we had actually met him a little while earlier, and I didn't tell you when he came on the scene for a moment. At the porter's house, the porter had said to him at Palace Beautiful, "Oh, I saw somebody from your hometown." And this man, Faithful, also came from Christian's hometown. And, of course, Christian's hometown is the city of destruction. So Faithful now joins him and says he's going to be his companion. And he says to him, this clever little thing. They start down the road, and Christian, who had started out from the city of destruction just before, Faithful says, then did Christian vaingloriously smile, because he had gotten the start of his brother. But not taking good heed to his feet, he suddenly stumbled and fell and could not rise again until Faithful came up to help him. Bunyan's saying, here's another case of this spiritual pride, where a man says, well, I've been a Christian for 20 years, and you're a brand new Christian, or a Christian 3 years. As if being a Christian 3 years, you must necessarily be a weaker Christian than I am at 20 years. Well, Bunyan had gotten started ahead of his friend from the city of destruction. He converted before this man. And Bunyan vaingloriously smiled at him when he met him, as if he were his superior. And, of course, immediately his foot slipped. Because why? Well, pride goes before a fall, doesn't it? I mean, Bunyan was forgetting again the lesson of humility. Because remember, being humbled, even if we hate it in this world, is the parent of meekness and gentleness. And really, it's also the parent of seeing the world like it really is, who you are. Because I know Spurgeon, the great Spurgeon, once said, a man would be humble if he'd get a right assessment of himself and a right assessment of God. You would certainly be a humble person. We must have forgotten that. And here's what it comes to. Faithful says this, I stayed in the city of destruction, but there was great talk presently after you were gone out that our city would in a short time with fire from heaven be burned to the ground. And if you remember, when Christian started this, he was given this idea that the city of destruction was about to be destroyed. Well, it's certainly that he's talking about this world. It's going to be destroyed. How? Well, it's going to be destroyed by fire. So he says, after you left and became a Christian, there was a great noise about town that our city was about to be destroyed by fire. And Christian says, what did the neighbors say? What did they talk of? Well, he says, for a while it was in everybody's mouth. Christian said, what? And did none of them but you come out to escape the danger? And it strikes me sometimes, even, let's say that you have a holiday dinner, and you really are talking about things earnestly with people, or you're able, these things turn to spiritual matters, you talk about it, and everybody listens and everybody considers, and very few people find fault when I do that, but usually there's one person who might really be interested. You're shocked that other people who know they have a soul and know that there's a heaven and a hell, really do believe that, then take no action to save themselves.